Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be diving in to the Troupe, the famous unit for the Quins that has stood the test of time. So, Harlequins are a very unique part of the Eldari army. They're often seen as units that can really only function in the Ghosts of the Webway detachment. However, I'm here to tell you today that that is simply not the case with this unit. And while Void Weavers and Sky Weavers and maybe even Shadow Seers are units that really only belong in the Ghosts of the Webway detachment, you can certainly run the Troupe in a regular Eldari army and have a lot of success with it, and actually have more success than you could with a unit of Howling Banshees in a lot of circumstances. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in. So for today's video, we're going to be doing the stats, weapons, and special rules of the Troupe. We're going to be looking at their strengths and weaknesses, combos and synergies, and last, how to use and position troops effectively on the battlefield. And we will go to Tabletop Simulator for that example. Looking at the Troupe's base stats, right off the bat, you see that they're faster than normal Eldari at movement 8. They still have that toughness 3, though, with 1 wound. They are a bit better in the leadership category than, say, things like Guardians, but, they share the same leadership stat as Aspect Warriors. They have an OC of 1 base, but this does increase to OC 2 in Ghost of the Webway, and their save is 6+. However, you're not going to ever use their regular save because they all come with a 4+ invulnerable save at all times, which is really, really good. 4+ invuls are a fantastic save, especially for squishy troops like this. As far as their ranged weapons go, they actually have some of the better ranged weapons in the Aeldari, codex as far as a melee unit goes. So fusion pistols are range 6, very short range, but they're essentially fusion guns, strength 8, AP -4, damage D6. They do have assault, they do have melta 2, and they are pistols, so they can be fired in close combat. They also come with neuro disruptors, which have anti-infantry 2+, assault, and pistol. These are actually much better than they were in the index. Now they have strength 4, AP -2, damage 1, instead of what they had prior, which was just basically garbage, right? We all know the neuro pistols of the index were pretty horrible, so they're back to their original status of being awesome. They also can take shuriken pistols, but you really don't take this unless you absolutely have to. Some troop members will, of course, have the shuriken pistol because you can't have, a whole unit of fusion pistols or neurodisruptors, but you can get pretty close. So typically in a 5-man unit, you'll probably have one or, basically one shuriken pistol, and if you choose to go with the 6-man unit, you're going to have 2 shuriken pistols. As far as their melee options go, they have 2 options. You can either take the Harlequin's Blade, which has 5 attacks, it's strength 3, AP -1, damage 1, hitting on 3s, of course, and it does have dev wounds, or you can choose the Harlequin special weapon, has 1 less attack, but 1 more strength, same AP and damage, and also has dev wounds. Now, most of the time, you're going to want to pick the Harlequin special weapon because strength 4 is a really important breakpoint. It allows you to wound things much easier on the battlefield, especially with the Harlequin's ability. So, yeah, I think Harlequin's special weapon is just the go-to. I've heard arguments about the Harlequin's Blade and just maximizing the amount of dev wounds you're going to take. But against the targets that the Harlequin's Blade is going to be good against, oftentimes what I found is the breakpoints are kind of still in the favor of the Harlequin special weapon just because you're getting so many more wounds on top of the dev wounds that you're already getting. So a great example of this would be something like Death Shroud Terminators, right? Death Shroud Terminators or anything that's toughness 6 or above, really. So toughness 6, toughness 7, Terminator equivalents. You really want to do dev wounds to those. So against those targets, you would think the Harlequin's Blade would be better. But in fact, when you charge in, the Harlequin special weapon is going to be wounding on 4s with the +1 to wound versus 5s with the Harlequin's Blade, which means that you're getting just much less, actual wounds, and you're really only trading up for 1 single dev wound on average when you pick the blades. So, in all honesty, I think you're going to go with the Harlequin special weapon 95% of the time. Now, you do get the option of a power sword, but this can actually only be taken by the troop leader or the lead player. So, yeah, it's good. It's just basically a, upgraded version of the Harlequin special weapon. It's +1 attack and +1 AP over the Harlequin special weapon. Okay, let's dive into the abilities because this is really the reason why you take Harlequins. Their Dance of Death ability is super, super powerful. So basically, at the start of the fight phase, you select one of the following abilities for this unit to gain until the end of the phase. Now, keep in mind, this is at the start of the fight phase, whether you fight first or not. So you have to pick carefully and you have to make sure your opponent knows what you're going for before anything happens. This is a very easy rule to forget when you're getting charged yourself. Just remember that it can activate when, an opponent charges you as well. So you get to choose between these three abilities. Hero's Prowess, which allows you to re-roll a hit roll of 1. Villain's Doom, which means that you can add 1 to the wound roll. And Trickster's Grace, which means your opponents subtract 1 from the hit roll when trying to fight them. This is a very versatile group of abilities. Now, you're mostly going to do the +1 to wound. However, there are cases against things like, vehicles, stuff like that, where you're trying to max the amount of dev wounds you're going to do to them, that you'd probably want to reroll hit rolls of 1. In most other cases, +1 to wound is just going to be straight better. I don't know the exact math and breakpoints on this, but essentially, you're going to want +1 to wound in most scenarios. Trickster's Grace is something you're going to want if you get charged by an enemy unit, which means you're harder to hit. And this can actually make them pretty durable, right? If somebody charges a troop, maybe after the Star Weaver explodes, they charge into you, you subtract 1 from their hit roll, and all of a sudden, they're not killing as many members as they wanted to. Maybe they kill 4 out of 5 instead of the full 5, and your troop master is left to devastate the enemy unit. So this is a really good group of abilities and actually makes the Harlequins a little bit more durable or hard-hitting, depending on what you need. They also come with flip belts. So flip belts are back, thank goodness, right? So each time the bearer's unit makes a normal advance, fallback, or charge move, ignore any vertical distance when determining the total distance the bearer can be moved during that move. Realistically, this is only going to come into play when there's different types of terrain on the battlefield. Maybe there's some pipes, or maybe there's a crate on the battlefield. I've seen a lot of tournaments with crates. Crates are a perfect example of this. Harlequins simply ignore them. They ignore the vertical distance when moving over them. So instead of having to move up, over, and then, down, they just move straight through, right? And crates are one of those things that I don't even think infantry can move straight through. They have to actually move up and around, up and over, I should say. So, this will help in those kind of cases, but normally it doesn't really come into effect. As far as their war gear options go, they can all take Harlequin special weapons instead of blades, which is perfect. The lead player can get an Aeldari power sword, and essentially if the unit contains 10 or fewer models, up to 4 of them can have special pistols. So 2 of them can have neurodisruptors, and 2 of them can have fusion pistols. In addition, if the unit contains 11 or more models, you could have 4 models with fusion pistols and 4 models with neurodisruptors, which is really insane. So you could have a big unit of Quins. It's a pretty penny. It's about 200 points, a little less than 200 points, 170 points for, a full unit of Quins there for 11 Quins. But you get a lot of pistols with that. So 4 fusion pistols, 4 neurodisruptors is pretty much enough to seal the fate of, plus all the shuriken pistols and stuff like that, is almost enough to seal the fate of a 5-man intercessor squad if you don't roll really bad. And, you chuck a grenade in there and then you pretty much have the squad finished off. So, yeah, it's pretty powerful. These pistols are very good. So you definitely want to take them if you have the chance. As far as the unit composition, of course, you have 1 lead player and anywhere between 4 and 11 regular players. And the points are as follows. If you have a 5-man unit of Quins, it's 85 points. A 6-man, 100 points. a 10-man, 190 points, and lastly, a 12-man, which is going to be 205 points. So I know I said 10-man, I really meant 11-man, because that's what you're going to have, right? You're going to have the lead player plus 6 or 10 additional quins, so it's going to be 11 in total, which is going to be 190. So yeah, a little bit more expensive. It does kind of get more expensive as the number of quins increases, right? Because big units usually cost more anyway. But yeah, that's essentially where we're at here. And honestly, for 190 for 11 quins, it's not a bad price point. However, I do prefer them as a player myself in smaller units. I prefer them in either units of 6 or units of 5 because I like to keep their cost cheap and I like that the unit can trade effectively. And of course, as far as their keywords go, the one important keyword here is that they have the grenades keyword. So, you know, grenades is a pretty powerful stratagem that you can use to deal mortal wounds to enemy units. Okay, let's look at their strengths and weaknesses. So, their strengths are they're extremely versatile. They have really versatile damage that is good into almost any target. Because they have dev wounds, they can put a few wounds on any target in the game. And they can also really dish out a lot of damage against high armored targets. They're extremely fast with movement 8, and they ignore vertical distances when moving, which is a bonus if you're on a battlefield that has crates or anything like that you have to move up and over. Also, they have solid short-range damage with fusion pistols and neurodisruptors, and always try to fire these if you can, unless you're going against an opponent that has really heavy overwatch and you don't have the token to spare, and you think you can take them in combat. Otherwise, make sure you can shoot those pistols because they are really good. They also have a 4+ invulnerable save, which makes them one of the most durable Aeldari infantry units in the entire codex, and with a potential -1 to hit to boot. Their weaknesses, however, are that they have no access to advance and charge within the codex, so a transport is usually a must-have. You need that extra 3 inches to get them where they need to go. And even in the Ghost of the Webway detachment, you just have a fallback shoot and charge strat. I don't believe you have an advance and charge strat. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't believe they have one unless I've been missing out this whole time. And also, Harlequins don't have any stratagem support outside of their own detachment. So outside of perhaps some minor things in, detachments like Warhost where they get an extra inch on their battle focus moves, they really don't have a lot of detachment support. They really just have their own detachment for targeting purposes. So yeah, in regards to the Harlequins, they're more of a one clown show. They don't really blend into any one detachment per se, except for Ghost of the Webway. However, I will say this, they are extremely self-sufficient, and the only real boost that they actually need is grenades. So, in most cases, they're going to do just fine without strat support. As far as their combos and synergies go, the Troupe Master gives them a 6-inch pile-in and consolidate, which allows them to also only have to move towards the closest enemy unit and not the closest enemy model, which can help them immensely across the board. So basically, they can go around. If you need to get to an objective and your opponent's trying to body block you, you could just kind of go around their unit instead, using your pile-in and consolidate moves to essentially get into base with them behind. The Shadow Seer also can give them 18-inch lone op, and enemies basically get the hazardous rule on their weapons, which is okay. I honestly think the Troupe Master is just much better in general for the troop. He has more damage, and of course, he's just better as far as the ability goes as well. The Starweaver can allow them to jump back into it at the end of the fight phase, which is massive. And I can't understate how good this is just in terms of the game itself and how the game works. The more activations you can get in with a single unit, the better your chances are at winning the game. And Harlequins at the end of the day are a trading unit. You want to trade up with them every single time. If your Harlequins are dying before they can do anything, of course, they're going to be useless, like any other unit that dies and does nothing, right? That's expensive. But if you can, get this unit to activate at least 2 times, killing, more than their points worth, which they are able to do because they do have the damage for it, then this unit just absolutely snowballs the game. However, there is an alternative build to these guys that you can run with Aeldari with the Falcon that can give them wound rerolls. Now, personally, I don't really care for the Falcon with Harlequins. I think the wound rerolls are good. But I will say this, not being able to jump back into the Falcon at the end of the fight phase basically means that they're not really able to trade up against a lot of targets. So they may be able to trade up once, but then they're going to die. And so a lot of times I find Harlequins and a Starweaver, which you're paying less for also, remember the Falcon is much more expensive, is just the better way to go in most cases. Now, in the Ghost of the Webway detachment, they can get a 6-inch reactive move when an opponent moves within 9 inches that can allow you to get back into the Falcon, but again, this is dependent on what your opponent does, so it's a little bit less guaranteed. They also have a stratagem that allows them to go back into Strat Reserve at the end of the opponent's fight phase, which can be good, but it's situational. And they have a stratagem that can allow them to charge opponents within 6 inches at the end of your opponent's charge phase, which is pretty powerful. So basically, in the Quinn detachment, this is a required, piece of, stratagem support, because you really need Harlequins to be on objectives, capturing objectives, and you don't need this in other detachments, right? So if you're running a boat of Quins in War Host or Aspect Host or whatever, right? You don't really need this because your Quins are not going to be, hopefully, standing on objectives. But in the Harlequin detachment, they're going to have to, because you're going to have to control primary. So having this ability to charge opponents if they don't want to charge you is important. Although it's not surefire. Sometimes opponents want to charge your Harlequins anyway, so it's not really a big deal. But yeah, situationally it is very good. And I've had situations where my opponent can't put a shooting unit near the Harlequins because of that exact reason. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dive into our tabletop simulator example. I'm going to show you some of the most common and most effective ways to deploy your Harlequin units and dominate with them on the battlefield. So we're going to go to tabletop simulator in just a second. Alrighty, everybody. So welcome to our tabletop simulator example, where we will be going over the ways to use the Troupe. Now, as discussed previously in the video, the Troupe really does need some sort of transport, whether that's a Falcon or a Starweaver. However, I actually do think that in general, generally speaking, you want a Starweaver. And the reason why, reason one, the Starweaver is a lot easier to hide, and its ability is really good. It allows the Quins to get back into it after the end of the fight phase. So Quins charge in, they kill something, they get back in the transport. That means that the Quins are going to get more activations. So if you can activate at least 2 times with the Quins because of the Starweaver, you will be able to outperform, points efficiency wise. You'll be able to outperform what the Falcon can give you in terms of wound rerolls. Now with the Falcon, basically, long story short, you're just trying to get as much burst damage as possible within a short period of time so that you can flip an objective. Now, those Quins afterward are very dead, right? They're going to die no matter what. So, realistically, I think that in most builds, you're going to want a Starweaver. The ability to, get more activations for your Harlequins, as well as just being cheaper, is really good. Plus, it does come with 2 shuriken cannons, and even though that's not as much firepower as the Falcon, obviously, like we said, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot easier to hide, and it takes up less board space so that it can integrate more easily into your army. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies that you can use and some positioning tips for your Quinn. So here is layout number 1. This is the very first layout here on GW Terrain. And we are going to go ahead and do the search and destroy deployment type. So I'm trying to do some different deployment types here to give you some additional examples. Now, obviously, the deployment and the train type will change where you're going to put your Starweavers. But in general, I'm going to explain good spots for your Starweavers so that you understand where to put them on any deployment type. So typically speaking, when you deploy a Star Weaver, you want to deploy it somewhere hidden, obviously, but near an objective. And the reason for this is because you want your Quins to be able to attack an objective and then, ideally fall back into the Star Weaver so that they can activate again. So let's say that we deploy our Star Weaver on the left-hand side here. Now, you might be wondering why there are 3 Star Weavers here. Well, there's basically 3 ways to go about deploying your Harlequins. If you look at your opponent's army and your opponent is, putting a lot of stuff on one side of the battlefield, that's not a side of the battlefield you want your Harlequins. Reason being is because Harlequins are easily overwhelmed. If your opponent has too many units that can stack up against them, they can easily kill the Star Weaver and then charge the unit of Harlequins inside and kill them as well. So that's not typically a good place to put them. Now, if you're going against a shooting opponent, that may not be that big of a deal. But, a lot of armies nowadays have a lot of good combat abilities and stuff like that. So if you see your opponent stacking on one side, it's better to put your Star Weaver on the other side. Okay, so in the case that your opponent doesn't have a lot going for your own expansion, like let's say your opponent throws a couple units over this way, but not that much. Maybe, if you're going against Space Marines, maybe they have a Rhino with some intercessors in it, or maybe they have an Impulsor with some Blade Guard veterans, something like that, right? They have some stuff going on this side of the battlefield, but not a ton. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and deploy our Harlequins on this side. Now, we're always going to be looking for good trades. Blade Guard are a good trade for Quins because Quins have +1 to wound, so they can get past that, toughness 4 that Marines have base, and they have dev wounds. And especially if you bring them with a Troupe Master, which you should be doing, the Troupe Master is an excellent inclusion, and it just brings the unit to another level. Blade Guard are going to have a tough time surviving against those Quins. Now, obviously, if it's a huge squad of 6, they'll probably live through that, but you're going to do so much damage to the unit that you're going to trade up at the very least, right? And then you also have other units that can help out by shooting the unit, stuff like that. You can kind of set it up so that your troop hits a weakened unit of Blade Guard, kills them, and then gets back in the transport. That's the ideal. But anyway, so let's say that's happening. Your opponent has something over here that they want to move towards the objective. And so we're going to put our Star Weaver over here. So let's go ahead and load in maybe a Rhino or something like that, right? Let's load in some Space Marines. Let's load in some of those. Let's see, yeah, here we go. So here's a Rhino. There we go. Chaos Space Marine Rhino has some Space Marines in it. Let's just do that. All right. So, and this could be any transport. It doesn't have to be a Rhino. I know people will call me out on that, but you guys get the point. It could be anything. So these guys are in the transport. We'll just put them over here for now. And the Rhino is over here. Now, if we go first, we're going to position ourselves. We're going to stage ourselves so that we're in between this terrain piece and this objective. So we're just going to go like this, right? We got 14 inches of movement. We could move here. However, I wouldn't, because anything that walks into here can shoot it. So what I would actually do is I would move it a little bit farther over here, right? You want to move it as far as possible. So that means probably a Star Engine or an advance move, either one, but we're over here now. Now, if the Rhino moves over here, right, the Rhino doesn't, hold on, let me go ahead and toggle that movement on. Let's say the Rhino moves, I don't know how much movement that is, 8 inches, then it advances, so it goes, 4 more inches, maybe like right here, right, first turn. This is typically where a Rhino will be, just right behind this wall. Whoops, there we go. That way it can interact with both objectives, right? Well, we're totally fine here. Basically, we've created a situation where our opponent is now forced to the center. If our opponent does this, goes forward and dumps models on the objective, they could score a secondary or something like that, but their models will immediately be destroyed. If they just move the Rhino on the objective, we can just put the Quins behind this wall and we can out OC, so we can deny them the objective. If we have the ability to kill the unit inside, though, of course, we're going to go for that, right? If it's not like a huge unit, like if it's not a unit of 10 Space Marines, we can probably kill them. So that's what we're going to go for. So either, well, let me put it this way, no matter what our opponent does here to this objective, we're going to be able to retake it just because we have this troop and a unit of quins, right? So a 5-man unit or a 6-man unit of Blade Guard, they have, a 5-man unit of Chosen, whatever it is, we're going to be able to deal with it. By the way, Chosen are a very powerful unit. However, Harlequins hit hard enough in general to get past their 3 wounds. So you're getting +1 to wound, you have strength 4 weapons, you also have dev wounds on top of that, you also have the Troupe Master, you also have the ability to throw grenades, right? So you have a lot of damage. Harlequins do a lot of damage to infantry targets, especially if you invest in some stratagems like grenades. Okay, so that's what you're going to do on that side of the battlefield. So let's do a quick example. Let's say these are Chosen, right? So your opponent brings the Rhino or whatever it is over here, slaps their, meat on the objective, right? Probably going to try to put it right here so that the guys can disembark on this side and be a little safer. Well, what we're going to do is Rhinos are really easy to pop. You just use something else in your army to pop this, a Warwalker, Fire Dragons, maybe. I wouldn't use Fire Dragons. I try to pop it with something else, but, Bright Lances in general do a really good job at killing Rhinos, especially out in the open like this. So then we just drop our 5 Harlequins off. Boink. We disembark them on the other side just so that we can, forget about Overwatch. We don't have to worry about Overwatch. We can use our Overwatch token on something else in the army. We move up to this wall. We're making sure we stay 1 inch away. Remember, cool thing about Harlequins, they ignore vertical distance. So even though this wall right here, I know they're infantry, but we ignore any kind of terrain. So if there was terrain that you would have to move up and over on, like, I don't know, competitive boards don't have this, but if there was like pipes or a hill or anything like that where you'd have to move up and over, Harlequins can ignore that. So we move up here. We destroy the Rhino. Rhino's destroyed. The Chosen get out. Of course, nothing's going to die because they have 3 wounds apiece. So they get out, and then Rhino's destroyed, right? So we're going to get rid of the Rhino. Now, these Chosen are still pretty damn powerful, right? They can definitely take a punch. We could kill them with stuff like Dark Reapers and stuff like that, but the truth is maybe we don't have that much firepower. Maybe we only have a couple of things to shoot at this unit and stuff like that, right? Like we don't really have much. So we just have to charge, right? And in this case, if we just charge in, we're probably going to lose. And I'll tell you why. Basically, if you don't have line of sight to the enemy, you are not going to be able to throw any grenades, right? You're not going to be able to fire fusion pistols. So against a unit of Chosen, you do need to reveal yourself. You probably need to use the token. If this is a unit of Intercessors, we got it covered. A unit of Quins can easily kill a unit of Intercessors, no problem, or equivalent. So regular Chaos Space Marines, you can do this wall thing and be totally fine. However, I know earlier in the example I said that these were Chosen, so we're going to go ahead and count them as Chosen. If the Rhino was right here, right, and the Chosen are not there yet, what we could do is when we move these guys, remember, they're disembarking 3 inches from the transport, so that puts them like right here. They have an 8-inch movement. So we can actually move them all right here, right? They can all be right here in the corner. Now, obviously, they might be targeted by an Overwatch. If they are, you just have to make them immune to Overwatch. But when this Rhino dies and these guys get out, maybe they get out over here to try to, make it not a guaranteed charge for you. They all want to be still on the objective here. Then we can fire our fusion pistols, we can fire our grenades off and stuff like that. So if we throw a grenade, right, on average, we're killing 1 Intercessor. Boom. Or not Intercessor. Sorry, I keep saying that. 1 Chosen. These are Chosen in this example, right? We're killing 1 Chosen with that. Then we have a bunch of fusion pistols, right? Now, they're D6 damage. With 3 fusion pistols, the troop leaders and the 2 other ones, we're probably going to kill, I would say 1. just to be on the safe side, guys, let's just say we kill one of them with the fusion pistols, and maybe we get like a couple wounds here and there with other things, or maybe we just get one wound, right, with the neurodisruptors and shuriken pistol. Then we go ahead and charge. We charge in here, and we're gonna say we don't have the Harlequin detachment stuff. We're just gonna have the base Harlequin unit, right? So we charge in here. Oh, and we'd also move this up as well, right? This would be right here. There we go. Something like that. Within 6 inches, so they can all get back in once the combat's done. And we're going to attack. The Troupe Master has 5 attacks. He's rerolling 1s to hit. He gets essentially +1 to wound anyway. So weirdly enough, I know it seems weird, but the Troupe Master actually gets +2 to wound. It's just you can never get +2. So basically what happens is the only time that comes into effect is if your opponent uses a -1 to wound stratagem, which is possible. If your opponent has it, then the Troupe Master basically just ignores it, right? So the Troupe Master will come in, will kill this other chosen pretty easily. Probably, I would say probably even kill this guy too. I think 5 attacks, AP -2, damage 2 will probably kill. You'll probably do about 3 wounds to these guys, would be my guess. But, you know, even so, maybe you do 2 wounds, you kill this guy, whatever's left of him, and you kill this guy as well. Or you put him down to 1 wound, and then the rest of your unit cleans up, right? That's a pretty realistic goal. And we didn't really shoot anything at them except this Harlequin unit. The only thing we did was we threw a grenade, we shot the pistols, and we took this unit of 5 chosen out by ourselves. If it's a unit of 10 chosen, yeah, you're going to need more firepower, but 5 Harlequins and the Troupe Master can pretty easily take care of that with the right stratagem support and their shooting. Once they're done with this unit, then they just simply get back in the transport, and now your opponent has to do it all over again, right? Your opponent has to put something on the objective. Your opponent has to try to attack the Star Weaver. If they charge the Star Weaver, these guys are safe. You know, after the Star Weaver dies, you disembark. You probably lose a Quinn, but you're going to be able to tackle the unit that killed it, right? Like if they throw Raptors at you, if they throw, you know, if you're facing against Space Marines, if they throw Assault Intercessors at you, whatever it is, you're going to be able to pretty much trade up against that unit. And what this means is your expansion objective is relatively safe from any kind of half-hearted attack. So if your opponent really doesn't go hard for your expansion, which they probably won't, in all honesty, because it's your expansion objective, and especially if you have a setup like this where they know that, you know, you have a lot of units that can just wipe them off the board and trade up with, they're just not going to do it, right? So that's one way to use Quins, to protect a expansion objective that your opponent's not really going hard for. The other way to do it is to attack their expansion objective and set up on them. So if you go first, right, or if you have a scout move or something like this, this is especially good if you have something like Arc Raider. If you're playing Reaper's Wager with Harlequins, you're playing some Dark Eldar and you have a Harlequin unit with a Troupe Master and it has the Arc Raider ability, you know, you can scout 9, which if you don't go first, you can just scout right behind here and be safe, or you can scout 9 up. Then you can move your 14 inches, right, plus probably in advance, and get right here. And your opponent is going to be very hard pressed. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. Your opponent's going to be a little bit hard pressed to actually be able to kill this thing, right? Because essentially what your opponent's going to have to do is move a really fast anti-light large, anti-tank unit around the corner here. So they're going to have to move something. Let's see how deep they need to get. Yeah, right about there, right? They're going to need to move in this area right here to be able to target this thing. And it's not impossible, don't get me wrong, but the only other armies that really have things that move 15, 14 inches are Eldar and Dark Eldar. So, not a lot of armies have access to things that can do this. You do have to watch out for advance and charge stuff, but you know, if your opponent has advance and charge, you could just do this, right? You just move a little farther back like this, and your opponent shouldn't be able to just charge all that distance, right? Especially if they deploy on the line, moving 12 inches, right? Maybe they get a 4-inch advance or a 3-inch advance. Like, okay, in that case, they could probably still charge, but you know, maybe in that case, you don't go for this deployment, right? You go for a deployment over here. This would be like if your opponent didn't deploy anything over here, and it was what we were talking about in the beginning of the, you know, example on tabletop. If your opponent doesn't deploy anything to really kind of protect their expansion, then you can take advantage of that with a unit of Quins. But if they have a bunch of stuff over here, yeah, the Quins aren't going to make it, right? You're not going to want to just throw them away like that. So that's one other thing you can do. Again, you only really want to do that if your opponent's not putting a lot of units towards their own expansion objective. And you'll know, based on their deployment, where they plan to go. Okay. Let's talk about this one. So this one is when your opponent kind of has a more balanced approach to their deployment and you think they're going to go hard for the middle. Or you think they're just going to, you know, kind of put things towards the middle, and you need to be able to score objectives in the middle. You need to be able to take the middle objective away from your opponent. Then you can put this Star Weaver right here, and your Harlequins can simply get out and charge something, right? So one of my favorite things to do if my opponent has like 1 or 2 units that want to just camp the middle is to use Harlequins to break that up. So moving your Harlequins from the tip, right, 3-inch disembark, right there. Then they go ahead and get their, you know, 8-inch movement. They'll easily be able to throw grenades and charge anything that's on this objective. And you can always move the Star Weaver, right? This is, you know, about 6 inches right here. Again, we're not going to pivot it. We're just going to probably use, we're going to move 8 forward. Maybe you can move like this. Yeah, we'll move like right here. And then maybe we can even star engine into a position right here so that perhaps our Harlequins can be within 6 of this model. You know, again, maybe not, but we can try, right? There's a couple ways to do it. If it depends where your opponent's models are, but if their models are like really close to one of these walls, like they put their models closer to your end, like, okay, let me just show you on here. If your opponent has their models like really close here, there's actually a couple things you can do. You can move the Star Weaver right here so that you guys, you know, your Harlequins can go ahead and get back after they're done assaulting. So, you know, they hop out here, move, charge, get back in the Star Weaver over here. Or if you're over here, right, you just have to position differently. You have the movement to do it, but you basically just do this, right? You charge on this side, get engaged, and then you can move back to here, which is, you know, something else you can do. And yeah, also, it does help a little bit, but the Troupe Master himself, with his Choreographer of War, I think it's Choreographer of War ability, gives him the ability to pile in and consolidate 6 inches. And I believe it doesn't have to be closer to the closest model, just closer to the closest enemy unit. So, you know, that can help you a little bit in basically making sure that you are not, you know, straying outside of the Star Weaver's range. Like, let me give you an example. A lot of people don't know how this works, but let's say we charge the unit, right? Now, you only need to be closer to the unit, not the model. So what you can do, especially if you're in the Quinn detachment, right? If we're like right here, right, and we charge in, usually you'd have to move like this. You'd have to get into base with something, right, when you pile in or consolidate. But with this, you actually don't really have to. You don't have to do that. You just have to make sure that you are closer to the enemy unit than you were in the beginning. So we could go like this, right? Boom, boom, and we could just kind of move along this way right here so we make sure everything is within 6 inches. And then when we pile in, we really don't have to make that maneuver, right? So first model charges in, we get into base with something, and then we can kind of just shimmy a little bit and just make sure we get everything into a position where we're within 6 of this. And I think we are. Yeah, you just have to move that guy a little bit over like this. But the good news is that Harlequins have enough essentially movement value to be able to do that, right? Or not movement value, excuse me. Their base sizes are so small that we can do something like this. And then when we pile in, we don't have to move closer to the nearest enemy model. So this unit right here wouldn't have to move here. I could move anywhere. So I could move, past my own guys 6 inches over here if I wanted to, if that's still within 6 inches. But we probably just put them right here, right? And just make sure you're within 6. Again, that's a little bit out, but again, it's not a big deal, because once we actually kill this unit here, like once this unit's dead and we make a pile-in move, the objective is right here, so we just have to get closer to the middle. So what we do is we just do this. We just move this model right here, and that should give us that 6 inches that we want. Yeah, right. So everything is now within 6 inches, and now we can go ahead and pile back into the Star Weaver. So you have to pay attention to stuff like that, right? So again, center of the objective is right here. We don't have to move directly towards the center. We just have to make sure that our consolidation move is closer to the center of the objective than we were to start out. So we could be right here in the beginning, not be within 6, and then consolidate here with one model, and we can get back in our transport. Boop, right there. Right? So again, that's another way you can kind of just bust the middle objective if you deploy your Star Weaver like that. And you can actually make a play for either this wall or this wall and just send your Harlequins in, send your clowns in, kill something, and then be in a really hard spot for your enemy to deal with, right? And the reason why I like this little spot right here is because if your opponent sends something after this unit and kills it, unless they draw Assassinate or they draw Bring It Down, they're not getting any secondary points off it, right? They're not getting any secondaries, and they're also not really getting any primaries, because check this out, right? Unless they have a 6-inch consolidation, if your opponent charges this with a unit of Assault Marines, right, they get in there, they just blow it the fuck up, right? It's destroyed. Harlequins pour out, right? They pour out like over here. Or shoot, maybe, you have them pour out like right like this. And now your opponent has to, this is funny. This part I love, because now your opponent has to consolidate into the quins, right? Even if they have a 6-inch consolidation, these quins are closer, right? That's 2.5. This is 3.7. And this guy's really close, right? So these quins are closer than the objectives. So now this unit has to pile in here if it wants to consolidate, has to do it. Doesn't have to, right? It doesn't have to consolidate if it doesn't want to. It can just stay there. But then the quins get to kill them, which is cool. So puts your opponent in a really bad spot. So yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can kind of do with quins to make it really inefficient for your opponent. And they're a really good trading unit. I would think of quins not as a unit that synergizes with the rest of your army, but that is used in a different kind of way to expend your opponent's resources and to hit something hard, or to give your opponent a hard time in capturing an objective and stuff like that, right? Positioning with this unit is key. And the cool thing about quins is they can also kind of take on anything. If your opponent has a fetid bloat drone, right? You're facing off against Death Guard. Well, hey, I mean, the fusion pistols aren't the best at killing those, but they can still deal some damage to those, right? If your opponent is, has one that can be engaged in combat, you're like, all right, I make myself immune to Overwatch, and I'm going to go ahead and charge in, and, I may not kill it, but I'm going to do a lot of damage to it. I throw a grenade in there, and now I can probably kill it, right, on charge with my +1 to wound. So you're wounding on 5s instead of 6s, which is really a big deal. And then your Troupe Master is actually wounding on 4s. So you're kind of actually putting them to the point where they can charge in and they can kill one of those things pretty easily. And if they get lucky with some fusion pistols, they could possibly even kill 2. I mean, probably is not going to happen, but hey, right? If you shoot some fusion pistols at them and you get a couple lucky fours to hit, which you'll probably need against Death Guard, and you get at least, a couple, maybe two fives. I know it's probably not going to happen, guys. Don't get me wrong. Fusion pistols aren't that good against bloat drones, but D6 plus 2 damage each can really just absolutely kill one of them really easily if you get lucky. So there is that. They can punch up against some seriously tough targets. So yeah, I really like Quins. I think they're really a quite flexible unit. They're really good. I don't really care for them in Falcons. I know people use them in Falcons to get a little bit extra punch out of them, and I totally get it if you're playing super competitively and stuff, and you're just planning on losing your Quins right after that. But I think if you're going to run them in a regular detachment, like you're going to run them in Warhost, or you're going to run them somewhere else, I don't really think you want to use a Falcon with them. I think you want to use the Star Weaver so they can, get in and out of a transport constantly. The other thing to mention is that in Ghosts of the Webway, there's an ability, a reactive move, where a troop can just get back into a transport. They can just make a 6-inch normal move, and that can be into a transport. So it's a little bit more effective in that detachment to maybe run a Falcon, because you have a way, if they move within 9 inches of you, you have a way to get back in the transport, whereas in other detachments, you don't really have that because you don't have a lot of stratagem support, right? So yeah, I think in most detachments, you're going to just want the Star Weaver. I think in Ghosts of the Webway, there is a kind of an argument to be had in taking the Falcon, because you do get those wound rerolls. But I gotta say, guys, I think the Star Weaver for the most part is the way to go. I know you can get wound rerolls with the Falcon, but the Falcon's also not that tough. So, you do have to think about that. And your opponent can play around that stratagem and kill your Harlequins anyway, which would be kind of a shame, right? If they can't get back in. So it's a mixed bag. But yeah, basically, I kind of hope this helped you guys realize, some of the ways you can set up Harlequins on the battlefield. Really what you're looking for in most scenarios is you're looking to put your Harlequins in between a piece of obscuring terrain, a wall, and an objective. So you want to look for these spots right here where there's, you're behind obscuring terrain, there's a wall, a physical wall that blocks line of sight, and an objective that's perfect for Harlequins. And you see basically every position I had those combination of things. Objective right here, wall right here, right? Obscuring terrain. And then over here, same thing, right? Wall, obscuring terrain, and then objective, right? You want them to be near those points. Okay, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I know I didn't say anything about the Shadowseer, and that's because I don't really like the Shadowseer. I think in most cases, the Shadowseer is pointless. I think that the only build that I ever, kind of care about the Shadowseer in is in Ghosts of the Webway, where you can infiltrate the Shadowseer and a Harlequin troop, and you can have like a big unit of 12 of them, infiltrating with the Shadowseer. That's really the only way I see them being run with the Shadowseer. But I still don't like it. I still am very uncomfortable with it. It's great if you get first turn, don't get me wrong. If you go first, woohoo, right? You have a big unit infiltrating up that's really good in combat and can, be immune to Overwatch and get, all these movement bonuses and hazardous and all this cool stuff, right? But if you go second, what happens? You're probably dead. Right? 18-inch flown op doesn't ever do anything. Actually, I've never had it do anything for me personally, and I've used the Shadowseer in Ghosts of the Webway probably in every game I've played that detachment as a pure Quinn detachment, and it just never goes off. I use the unit as an infiltrating unit in pure Quins because I have to, because I need one infiltrating unit, but that's all, right? I think the big unit is all or nothing. It's really good if you can get first turn. If you can't get first turn, it just tends to not do as well if your opponent knows what they're doing. So, yeah. Anyway, that's why I'm not going to really go into it. If you guys want a video on it, though, later on, I'll really try to make an effort to play it more and to, understand that more. But if you're looking for advice on how to run Harlequins better as well, and you don't want to just look to my channel, because I'm not a main Harlequin player. I love Harlequins, but I got to admit, I'm more of a dabbler of Quins. I just think they're really cool. I've used them for a long time, but I've never really run them as a pure army in a long time, except on, Tabletop Simulator. And in person, when the Codex came out, I ran a proxy, I proxied in a couple games, 1K and 2K lists, but I haven't played them in a while. So basically, if you want an expert advice on Harlequins, seek out Exile Wargaming. This is a little bit of a call out to him and his channel. He does battle reports on there talking about Harlequins, how to use them, the strategies, the lists, all that good stuff. Really excellent battle reports. Check him out. I've done some interviews with him on the channel before as well. Check those out on my channel. And, he'll give you really good advice on how to run Quins competitively as a mixed Aeldari Quinn army. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this tabletop simulator example, and we will be back to the video in just a second. All right, we're back. So in conclusion, the Troupe is one of the most versatile combat units in the entire game, bar none. It has decent shooting, good combat, and it's fairly durable. And honestly, I think they're a solid inclusion to any Aeldari list needing a flexible melee unit. So if Howling Banshees are a little bit too one-dimensional for you, they can't quite punch into the targets you want them to punch into because they have a low number of attacks. By the way, Howling Banshees are awful into anything that has more than 5 models. They're just not good into those targets. So, Horde-like units, things like cultists or, units of poxwalkers or anything like that, they just don't have the volume of attacks to deal with, which is fine, right? They are a specialized unit. But the thing is the Troupe can basically deal with anything. And yeah, you're not trading up against poxwalkers, but you're not going to trade down, right? You're not going to fail to kill them, which Howling Banshees will do. So just to give you a kind of a quick example of that, poxwalkers with their little feel no pain can quite easily survive a Howling Banshee charge, just because Howling Banshees are not going to be able to put enough attacks out to kill them. Especially when they get the, auras of contagion going on and you're at -1 to hit. The Troupe, on the other hand, will very easily deal with a poxwalker unit pretty much no matter what. Between their shooting and combat, they should easily be able to deal with a full 10-man unit with the number of attacks that they have. So, the Troupe is going to be much more flexible into a lot of different targets. And because of that, I really do think that they're a good inclusion to almost any army. I'm actually considering dropping some stuff in my Warhost list to include a unit of Quins, just because they can hit against targets that the rest of the army just can't, right? Now, unless you're playing Aspect Host and you're playing with, all the stratagem support for the melee units, the Warrior's Bane and the rerolls and all that good stuff, I really don't see any reason why you wouldn't consider a Troupe in your other types of lists. I mean, even Seer Council, I think, could have some, positives, could get some positives out of this type of unit. And Seer Council is one of those armies where I really think you probably don't need any outside help. You just need Psychers, Guardians, in my honest opinion, and Aspect Warriors. But the Troupe is so flexible that I think pretty much any detachment could benefit from them. And yeah, they're just a fantastic unit overall. I think they're great. Honestly, they've done really good work for me in pretty much any kind of game I've used them outside of Ghosts of the Webway. And of course, in Ghosts of the Webway, that's pretty much all you're using, and they are very good. I have a lot of success with them in Ghosts of the Webway as well, just as a unit. I think the failing of the Ghosts of the Webway detachment isn't the Quins themselves, it's that you don't have enough unit depth, right? You just have the same thing over and over again, which doesn't really lend to, an army that can take out certain archetypes. But, still, Ghost of the Webway can win a lot of games. It's a pretty powerful detachment. And like I said before, at the end of my tabletop simulator example video, there is a guy on YouTube, believe it or not, Exile Wargaming, who does Harlequin specific tactics and tips and strategies. So check out his channel if you want more depth on the Harlequins. But yeah, I personally think great unit, and I'm honestly looking forward to running them in more of my lists as well. All right, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys have any Harlequin-based, strategies or tips that I've missed in this video. Leave them in the comment section for me, and I will see you guys next time. One last thing before I go, I do want to just let you guys know out there, for everybody who watched my Eldar Knights video, we've reached our goal for the Eldar Knights. So basically anything on top of this is just going to be gravy. We're going to, kind of use that to, basically enhance the codex and to try to make it, as clean as possible. But I am going to start working on the rules for the Eldar Knights, which is awesome. It's awesome to hear. I'm glad we reached our goal, and I'm excited to start working on that. So, what that means is everybody who has pledged to the amount of the Create Your Own Knight level, reach out to me via Gmail, proxyhammer1@gmail.com or proxy.hammer1@gmail.com. The email's in the description below. Reach out to me and we can talk about making a data sheet, because I am going to be starting to work on that as soon as possible. Lastly, thank you to all my patrons and supporters for supporting the channel over the last 2 years, almost 3 years now, which is crazy. But we've done it, guys. We've been around for at least a couple years and things are looking awesome. So thank you. To anybody who wants to support the channel, I have Patreon free trials activated, which means you get automatic access to our Discord community. Great community. Honestly, the least toxic community probably in 40K. Honestly, there's just a lot of good people in there that play Eldar. And if you do want to support the channel and, give me a little bit of a boost and a little bit of help, running the channel and stuff like that, consider becoming a Patreon member. And Patreon members do get ad-free access to the videos that I post on YouTube. So yeah, keep that in mind. And lastly, I do have a channel store page and an Amazon affiliate link for those of you who want to grab some discounted Eldar apparel on the store page or some discounted Eldar models on Amazon. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.